What is going on, guys? Today I wanted to bring you guys something that I haven't done in a little while, and that is actually a deck profile video. I've been working with Drytrons a lot and really testing out this deck a lot. It's a deck that's pretty near and dear to my heart. I've loved it ever since it came out. If you guys have seen some of the other previous videos on the channel, you'll know that I've had a lot of different variations of the deck, you know, being through like Megalith. I played it when it had the 3 Ben 10, which is absolutely broken. If that ever comes back, it would be phenomenal, but let's be real, it never will. It's a deck I've been playing a lot, and it's a deck that I think I've learned a lot from. And I would like to share that with you guys and help you guys, if you guys are Drytron players, to help try to make maybe a more optimal build, or kind of give you some ideas that maybe you weren't thinking about before in terms of like ratios and things like that. It's been a little while since I've done a deck profile video. There was a period in time where a lot of my uploads were mostly just deck profiles. I didn't really want to be like a deck profile channel. I just wanted to have those scattered in throughout, so I wanted to make a couple more videos before doing a deck profile video again. That way it's not just a huge splurge of deck profiles. But I'll make sure to keep this one short and sweet, just kind of go over why I landed on this build, and also some of the budget options for the deck as well. The deck isn't super budget friendly, keep in mind, but there are some different budget options you can do for certain cards that won't affect the game as much, but keep in mind that there are some cards that really don't have replacements. I'll try to kind of find something for it, the best that I can. I'll let you guys know what I kind of came up with for different things you can put into the deck. If you do find the video helpful, please remember to absolutely destroy the like button and the subscribe button if you aren't already. It really helps me out with getting content out to you guys, as well as to other people as well who might enjoy the content. And if you have any optimizations for me, or if you have any ideas of what maybe some cards that I didn't think of that could replace other cards in the build, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Without further ado, let's just jump on into it. Alright you guys, so this is pretty much the build that I found to be the most consistent. And that's one of the things that this deck really kind of struggles with, is consistency. It is a combo deck, so it does tend to kind of break at times. We do have some kind of ways around that and kind of ways to avoid, you know, the dreaded Droll. And I'll go over that in the build. And so what I'm going to do is kind of just go through the build really quick, and then I'll go into the budget options after that. So first off, for the Drytron lineup, of course, we have triple alpha, triple zeta, double delta, and double gamma. This is pretty much like the more consistent version of the deck. I've seen some builds go with 3 gamma, but I'm not so sure how I feel about that, just because gamma can't summon gamma, so if you have double gamma in hand, it's kind of dead. Next up for starters, we also have the triple diviner. Pretty much the most important card in the combo, I would say, just because it can search you both the ritual spell or any ritual monster essentially. Next up for the fairy package, we have the triple orange light and double Ava. Next up, as far as the ritual lineup goes, we have 1 Ben 10, 1 Eda 10, 1 Ultimateness for the fairies, and then we have 1 Draconids. I was running a build for a while that cut out the Draconids, but what I found is that this deck doesn't really have an out to window aside from kind of hard drawing away into Draconids and just basically running it over. Next up, we are playing the Dragoon package to end out the monsters. The Dragoon package I was really against for a little while, but what I found is that, like, if you get Drolled, it's so much advantageous to still be able to go into Dragoon and still have a negate, and just basically survive for a turn until you can kind of combo off again. That's the really nice thing about Drytron. Even on your turn 2, you still have a lot of firepower to go full combo and really still be able to build a crazy board. So as long as you can survive 1 turn, you're usually pretty good. Next up, as far as the spells go, you have 3 Drytron Nova, 3 Cyber Emergency for the Searchers. Next up, we have a few of the power spells. First off is going to be Triple Tactics Talent. This is one of my favorite cards to run this build, just because, like I said, it's a combo build, so most likely people are going to try to hand trap you. And if it's a hand trap you can eat fairly easily, like let's just say like Ash or something, or like if they Ash the wrong thing, this gives you so much advantage because you could like draw 2 cards, you can rip a card out of their hand, or like if you're going second, you can even take one of their monsters. So it's 3 cards that are banned into 1 card. So it's a really powerful card, I think really necessary for this deck to stay consistent. And also, most importantly, if you do end up getting Drolled and you don't have a way out of it, like aside from like, you know, Orange Light or Called by the Grave or anything like that, you get to look at your opponent's hand and rip the most important card out of their hand. So even if you do get to go into like Dragoon, or even if you have to go into Dragoon, you can see what card might out your Dragoon and just take it out of their hand. Also, I run 3 Droplet. I don't run any like hand traps or anything like that, and even when I do draw Orange Light plus a Fairy, I almost never use Orange Light as a hand trap on my opponent's turn unless I'm like 90% sure that hand trapping them there will stop the rest of their combo. And the reason for that is just because Talents is pretty prevalent in the meta right now, and so me Orange Lighting and basically losing 2 cards out of my hand, and then if they either rip another card out of my hand, then I start the game with 2 cards, 3 on my draw, I guess. Or if they get to draw 2, then I just lost so much advantage off of that exchange. And also, Orange Light is typically better just for protecting your own plays on your turn, especially like if they end on something like Appaloosa or something like that. Having the Orange Light in hand available to basically negate the Appaloosa, since it's a once per chain effect, is really powerful. And so Droplets is here just for going second. It's also really good for going first, because if they do have a way to out your Ultimatus, you still have Droplets, and it's really hard to play through Droplets, especially when you have so much fodder you can feed the Droplets. Next up, we have the one of power spells. Basically, we have one of the ritual spell, one instant fusion, and then one called by the grave. The instant fusion is for the Millenniumizer's trick, which you'll see in the extra deck. This card you could probably take out, and I might replace it with like Foolish or like a second Meteonis or something like that. And so you could do something like that if you wanted to. Next up for the extra deck, as far as the synchro monsters go, I'm just running the one Herald, and I also run one Millenniumizer's trick, as you saw for the instant fusion. What you could do is, if you're opting to not play the instant fusion, just replace this with another Herald. I feel like that's probably the most useful. I actually am considering doing it just because it has come up a couple times where the second Herald would have been really necessary, and probably would have gotten me a lot closer to winning the game. Because I didn't have the second Herald, I couldn't search for like a certain ritual monster I might need, or like a ritual spell, stuff like that. So in that situation, it might be worth it to just run double Herald. As far as the Link monsters go, we run one Link Kuriboh, one IP, pretty standard, you're ending on IP. Phoenix is pretty standard, and then Unicorn as well. And we're also running the one Borosword Dragon. I have seen people run Access Code instead of Borosword Dragon, and I personally think that's incorrect. The only thing I don't like about running Access Code in this deck is that all of your other Link monsters are dark except for Phoenix. You have to specifically go out of your way to go into Phoenix to get a second pop. And it doesn't really come up as much, as well as Borosword can attack twice, which is usually helpful for closing out the game. And then Borosword plus any Drytron or Herald of Ultimateness is OTK. So that's why I prefer Borosword. As far as the XYZ monsters go, we're of course running the 2 Fafnir, absolutely necessary as well. One Downerd and one Zeus. Also, this is just really nice because if you're in a situation where you only have like Gamma or something, you could actually Gamma back a Fafnir, attack over something or attack into something, and then overlay into Downerd, and then overlay into Zeus, and then you have a free board wipe. And then we're also of course running the one Beatrice. And then lastly, we of course are running the Dragoon package, so we're running the Preda and the Dragoon, and then we're also just running one Entis just to be able to send off of Diviner. Lastly, for the side deck, I'll breeze through it. Psycho Reader for other Drytron mirror matches. It's kind of like your scariest matchup, so Psycho Reader is just there for that. As well as also randomly outs Eldritch cards, which is kind of helpful in case you run into an Eldritch deck. Triple Droll, again for other Drytron mirrors or other cards or other decks that add a lot of cards to hand. This actually comes in pretty handy against like Shaddoll Invoke Dogmatica, because if they open with Magical Meltdown, you Droll them, and that basically for the most part it kind of ends their turn. They might be able to end on like one Mechaba or something like that, but it's usually not going to stop you. Double Twin Twister and Red Reboot for back row decks. Triple Imperm, this is mostly for Tri-Brigade, but obviously just a good generic hand trap for when we know we're going second. You basically almost always swap out talents for the Imperms, unless the matchup is really helpful for you to be able to take one of their monsters. Also, Imperm is really important in this current format, I think, because it also plays around talents. And lastly, one card I've been using recently that I feel like has been really helpful, Solemn Judgment. This card is actually really broken in this deck when you're going first, when you know you're going first, because the only thing that outs your boards are something like Kaiju, which you can't really get around, but the other cards are Dark Ruler and Droplets. And guess what people are never sending off of Droplets? Trap cards, unless they're Eldritch players. So you can actually Solemn the Droplets, and you can Solemn the Dark Ruler, and then you're basically still have your 4 or 5 negates or whatever, and there's no way they're playing through that after getting rid of one or multiple cards out of their hand. Also, it's just a really strong card in general. Let's just say you get hand trapped and you end on Dragoon. Dragoon Judgment is like such a strong combo that it's really hard to play around. I had a match one time when I played against Tri-Brigade, basically ended on Dragoon and Judgment. They summoned one of the Zodiac cards, went into Borbo or whatever the one that attacks directly is, and obviously that doesn't trigger Dragoon because there's no effects that activate. And then they went and, they made a freaking XYZ orgy under Zeus, and then I just Judgmented the summon of Zeus, and then that was GG's. Now we'll go into the budget cards. So obviously in the side, as you just saw, I do run triple Psycho Reader, and I do run triple Imperm. The Imperms are pretty easy to swap out for something like Effect Veiler, really cheap. Also pretty much does the same thing, except for obviously Imperm you can activate on your turn. This is also really good against Winda because you can activate this on your turn. But the Veiler is also nice because it is a level 1 that you can also use in very dire situations to get into Fafnir if you need to. But like I said before, this also dodges talents, which I think is really important in this format. So if you can do Imperm, then I definitely say do Imperm, but I know they've gone up in price recently, so it might be a little bit harder. Cycle Reader is really just a generic kind of slot that I just kind of decided to contribute to more Drytron hate. But I think that Drytron has not been played as much as I thought it would be, so you could actually probably just swap this for whatever generic hand trap you want to use. I was actually thinking about swapping these for like Nibs or Dark Rulers, just because Dark Ruler still outs the Drytron board as well. If you do Dark Ruler, then you don't play into talents by activating Cycle Reader. So kind of something I've been thinking about, but I think the extra 3 slots for Drytron I think are important, just because it is a very overwhelming deck. As far as expensive cards in the main deck go, like I said, there isn't really a good replacement for Diviner, unfortunately. Like I said, this deck isn't a very budget-friendly type of deck, unfortunately, so these you're gonna have to kind of just eat the cost on. If you are just like waiting for them in the mail, or if you are just trying to play budget for a little bit until you can kind of grab these, and you could probably run Manjus, I think is what it is. Yeah, Manju. And if you're gonna do that, then you might want to run like the Megalith package to go into rank 4. It's like a Abyss Dweller or Baguska, which are pretty useful. But I would say that these you just have to bite the bullet on, unfortunately. But as far as other cards go, some of the more expensive cards in the main deck that we were looking at were something like Droplets. So these are pretty easily replaceable. With these, you could actually just replace with Dark Rulers, obviously. Much cheaper. Essentially do similar things, but of course Droplets still allows you to OTK. Also really good quick effect for like random things, like if they summon Shurag or something like that, you can Droplet it. Like I said, also this is just also really strong going first as well. And the nice thing about Droplet is that it will be getting a reprint really soon, so it should go down in value. I mean, obviously like the original print and then the OTS ones are not going to go down in value, but it should be a much cheaper card, hopefully coming soon. As far as talents goes, it's really hard to find a replacement for these, just because, like I said, it is a really broken card with 3, broken effects in one. What you could do alternatively is run more consistency cards, such as Preparation of Rites. One thing you could do too is that this is kind of like a defensive slot in the deck, in the sense where, like, I typically try to run a set amount of like defensive cards. You could replace these with like Ghost Bells. I think Bells are really nice because, one, they're really good offensively, because they can stop a lot of things. Like, let's just say that your opponent gammas you or something like that, you can actually use Bell to stop it. Also, Bell will stop DD Crow and Call by the Grave and Cycle Reader, which are some of the things that hit the deck a little bit harder. So you could actually swap these out for Bells. So I think Bell is a very overlooked card this format. I was running Bells for a little while as well before, and it definitely does come in handy. But like I said, if you can get a playset of talents, that'd be great. I think they are going to get reprinted in the Megatons. So hopefully they should be a little bit cheaper as well, similar to the Droplets. But if they don't, then I definitely save up, just because it's a really good staple, I think, especially since Call by the Grave is at 1. And so I think for now, Talents is going to be a card that's going to be here to stay. And then also, as far as the main deck goes, like I said earlier, we're running the Dragoon package. If you are going to sub out the Dragoon package, then I think that you just need to run more consistency cards, such as Prep. You could also run like a second Meteonis. I think that would be really useful as well. So you could run like 2 Prep, 1 Meteonis, something like that. I think that most people are going to have a harder time finding substitutes for these 6 cards. So I think that if I were to rebuild the deck and not be able to play these cards, I think what I would do would probably run, I would definitely run, like I mentioned earlier, the 3 Bells for here, 2 Prep and a Meteonis, and then maybe swap out 1 other card in here for Natasha somewhere in here. Maybe like one of the Evas or something like that. I feel like your deck really lacks a little bit of a lot of forward momentum if you get hand trapped a lot, that I think Natasha would help make up for, especially if you're going second, or if you're in like a deeper levels of the game, like past turns 1 and 2. As far as the extra deck goes, I would say it's pretty budget friendly, aside from Downard and Zeus, and then the Preda Dragoon. Everything else I feel like is pretty standard, roughly about 20 bucks or less. I really think you should not be substituting these 2 cards if possible, especially because Zeus is such a staple at this point that I would say most people probably should have this card, just because it's played in literally almost every deck at this point, and it's such a powerful card that I think you're just better off not getting caught without it. This is also going to get a reprint pretty soon as well, so hopefully that should help out a lot of people who are having a hard time being able to pick up this card. Downard, if you really could only pick like one of these, obviously I'd say keep Zeus, and you could probably swap this out for something like Lyralist, just to help you like survive a turn if you like need it. That's kind of the main thing, I guess. Also, Appaloosa is a really good swap out for this deck as well. There's some times where I wish I had Oppo, but I just didn't have the space for it. Also, any one of these cards can basically be replaced with Arclight, just because having a second Arclight is super helpful. And also, like, a couple honorable mentions. So these are kind of the three I would kind of immediately go to. A couple honorable mentions are Herald of Mirage Lights and Cross Sheep. Herald of Mirage Lights, I saw somebody playing this not too long ago, and it actually kind of worked out in a weird way, because you can use any two Drytrons to go into this. And as long as you have a fairy in hand, you have a spell and trap negate, which is kind of nice. Also, if this leaves the field, you get to search for a ritual spell and a ritual monster. This will let you add back basically like Ben 10 and Medionis, which is kind of wild. So I think this is still a very valuable card to have, or like a good like substitute for any one of these cards. Cross Sheep is kind of like the last card on the list, but it is kind of nice if you do ritual summon to a zone it points to be able to draw 2 and discard 2. That really helps for kind of digging into your deck and also getting rid of cards. So these are kind of like the immediate ones I would go to, and most of these are pretty cheap, I'd say. Like, I mean, all of these are basically like less than like $3 or something like that. And then obviously Oppo, you can go for like the Ultra version, I think, and then, or you can go for like the Gold Rare version, which I think is like $7 or $8, and then the Ultra is like something like 10 or 12. But yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it for my Drytron build. If you guys did like it, please feel free to like and subscribe, like I mentioned before. Leave me any comments of any other substitutions you've made that you feel like are really helpful for you, that really worked out for you. And feel free to try some of the suggestions I've made in the video. Like I said, it's a deck I've tested out pretty extensively. I really like, and I think that has a lot of merit. But if it does get hit on the ban list again, like even in like a very small capacity, I feel like it's probably gonna die. Also, there's kind of those new Exo Sister cards that are coming out or something like that, who kind of basically like a hard counter to this deck, unfortunately. I don't think that deck's gonna be very meta in general, but just something to note. But yeah, overall, just a very strong deck still, I think, and something you have to look out for whenever you are playing a tournament. But alright, that's about it. I'll catch you guys on the next one.